Greetings, Shadow Chasers and Dust Makers. I am the Jordan Scholar. With me, as always, is my faithful snow leopard demon, Anthora. Would you like to say a word to the class today? Or are you still... Yeah, she's still being quiet. That's okay. But nonetheless, I am the Jordan Scholar, and welcome to our virtual Jordan College, where we're going to be talking about and exploring and studying all things related to the worlds of Philip Pullman, his Dark Materials, and of course, the Book of Dust. So right off the bat, I guess I should thank everybody for watching my last video. I know a lot of people actually really enjoyed it, so that was really cool. Thank you for all those likes and subscribes. And today it's going to be something a little more low-key, a little less scholarly, if you will. I finally got my copy of, let me see if I can hold it up, of The Imagination Chamber. And this came out, I guess, a few months ago. So basically we're just going to be running through it, reviewing it. I'm going to probably read you guys a few passages from it. I know it's been kind of a bit of a controversial thing as far as I know a lot of people are waiting on the third volume and the Book of Dust trilogy, which of course, why wouldn't you be? But we do have some exciting news on that front. As of July 6th, I think it was, Philip Pullman actually put up a tweet. Somebody was asking him a question about the Secret Commonwealth. And he replied saying that he was actually, and he didn't want to comment on it because he was actually finishing up on the very last part of the last book in the Book of Dust trilogy. So yeah, so this is pretty exciting. Somebody had brought it to my attention because this is really the first word that we've gotten on the as yet unnamed third volume in the Book of Dust. I keep wanting to say the third book in the Book of Dust trilogy, but that just sounds awkward. Nonetheless, yeah, that's some of the first news that we've heard in a while. I mean, I know some people were worried that he was going to pull like a George R. Martin and it was going to be like a Game of Thrones situation. However, never fear. If I had to guess, I mean, if he's this close to finishing the book, I'm thinking probably by the end of the year he's actually going to have it written, and of course it has to be printed and bound and edited and all that sort of stuff. But maybe as soon as, I don't know, let's say maybe early, or late winter maybe of next year or early spring, we could actually have the book in our hands, which is going to be a big event, and certainly going to be a big event here at Jordan College. But as I was saying, we do have some ancillary material. I was talking about the Imagination Chamber, which is going to be the focus of our little class today. However, there's one other thing that I want to bring to you guys' attention, and that is, for the first time ever, the Collector's is going to be available in hardcover. And I believe that's coming out September the 20th. It's available for pre-order now. And again, this is just kind of in the style of like Serpentine and Lyra's Oxford. It's kind of just a short story novella type thing. It's been available as an ebook for a while. I don't know if all you guys are that familiar with it. But basically, yeah, it tells the story of two Oxford scholars as well as a painting of a beautiful woman and her mysterious golden monkey that always shows up in the painting with her. It's actually just kind of a fun little spooky story. Gets into the whole many worlds hypothesis that Bernard Stokes business, which we all know about so well. But yeah, it's a fun story, and I would actually also suggest going to Audible, because Bill Nye actually reads it aloud. So I imagine if you're a completionist and you want to get the hardcover, that would be pretty cool, and then you could actually listen to Bill Nye read it to you. But yeah, speaking of ancillary material, as I was saying, and I cannot get, okay, there we go. The Imagination Chamber, and it's subtitled Cosmic Rays from Lyra's Universe. And so basically, the idea of this, I think he got from the Lantern slides. I don't remember if you guys remember the little snippets, the little prose pictures that he did for the 10th anniversary of his Dark Materials. They were really cool, just little snippets, just little character bits, or talking about maybe some themes or whatever that had to do with his Dark Materials. This covers his Dark Materials and the Book of Dust. So basically he came up with the idea of the Imagination Chamber as a metaphor as opposed to his Lantern slides. Because he likened it, he's always been into physics and all that sort of good stuff. But he likened it to a cloud chamber. And and a cloud chamber is one of those things where we have obviously millions and billions of charged particles and cosmic rays passing through us all the time, but we can't see them unless they're in some kind of a special cloud chamber, something like that. And his central metaphor, because, Mr. Pullman's always about the metaphors, his central metaphor, and I'll push up my glasses to seem even more studious, is that basically there are story particles, and these story particles work in exactly the same way as like charged particles and the cosmic rays that you can see in a cloud chamber, only instead of a cloud chamber, it is an imagination chamber. So the imagination, the energies of the imagination is basically what's making visible what would otherwise be invisible. And in the introduction, he also gave a rather tantalizing tidbit about where these story particles come from. That's part of the thing that Lyra is going to be on the trail of in the third volume in the Book of Dust trilogy, which is going to be pretty cool. So, as I said, has been kind of controversial in the fact that, I mean, basically, it's just little snippets of story. And I understand if some people, are completionists and they don't necessarily want to spend the money on this. But it's a really, really nice book. It's a really handsome book physically. I mean, I'm sure it's going to look great on the shelf. I love the red lining that it has. And Anthora and I, she's always playing it cool, but yeah, she enjoyed it too. And it just offers some hints into the lives of all our old favorites like Lyra and Will and Alice and Malcolm and Lee Scoresby and Azrael and Mrs. Coulter and all those great guys. I know a lot of people said, "Oh, is this just a cash grab? Is it just there's not much for the money?" But the way I read it, I guess I should preface this by saying that we know that Philip Pullman is a big believer in the democracy of reading, and he's never one to there's no top-down definitive authoritarian way that you should read a book. Obviously we here at Jordan College condone the same message. However, there are certain ways that you can read that might make something more enjoyable or a more valuable experience. And what I found, or I should say what we found, right, with the imagination chamber is, again, I kind of took Mr. Pullman's advice on how to read poetry, which, again, it's a slender volume, and they're just a few paragraphs here and there. But basically, when you read it like poetry, and somebody was saying, you could read this in like 10 to 15 minutes. It's like, yeah, you could. But again, I mean, you could take a book of, say, like Mary Oliver poems or poetry and race through it, but you're not like gobbling it down. You're trying to like absorb it. You're trying to savor it. And one of the things Philip Pullman has always suggested about poetry is that you have to read it aloud. It's, again, if you're like nestled away in a quiet section of the Bodleian Library, you don't want to necessarily disturb the neighbors, that's okay. But nonetheless, you have to read it aloud. Air has to like pass through the lips. You have to make it a physical thing. And I started doing this with a lot of old poetry that I loved. I remember going to the park one day and reading some Shelley and Keats aloud, and it was just kind of a very transformative thing. He talks about, the incantatory power that poetry has. It's almost like a magic spell, and that it has to be spoken aloud. But nonetheless, that was kind of the approach that I took with the imagination chamber. And some of these snippets, some of these little prose snippets that he gave us, I almost liken them to Japanese haiku, which are, most of you probably know, they're just kind of short form poems, and when they're translated in English, at least, they're composed of usually 3 lines and 17 syllables. But I've read some of those, and some of them have the effect of just being so evocative and so lyrical. They're just like, I liken them just like a little pebble that's dropped in your mind, and it's kind of the same thing with these. I mean, again, the imagery of Philip Pullman is so great. You just have to let that pebble be dropped into your mind and just let it ripple out and just kind of let it settle. And, for me, one of the most extraordinary things of Philip Pullman's prose has always been this just fantastic descriptive quality. I think somebody talked about Edgar Rice Burroughs one time, and it's like, well, whatever you want to say about his writing, nonetheless, like when it rains in an Edgar Rice Burroughs novel, the reader gets wet. And it's like, yeah, when you're reading about like the far north and Northern Lights, and it's like, the reader the reader needs an extra blanket when they go to bed because it's just so evocative, and he is. I mean, the world of his dark materials and the Book of Dust. It's just such one of the reasons why I think they're so popular is as far as the prose goes. Not only is it so just lyrical and rich, but it also has this quality of embodiment, and that is to say, again, it's a world of taste and sound and touch and smells, and all of this is just evoked for us constantly. And one of the things I really liked about the Imagination Chamber is because it kind of did the same thing for me. It kind of achieved the same effect. And if it can kind of just evoke the world, or in this case, worlds, that we love so much, that's basically all I want from a work, if it's part of, an established universe or what have you. So basically what I thought, I'm just going to read, I don't know, maybe about half a dozen of these. Actually, I'm probably going to get some water first. But, Anthora, I don't know, do you want me to read or do you want to read? Okay. She wants me to read. No big surprise. So I'm going to read from about half a dozen of these that I really like, and just to kind of give you all that taste that I was telling you about, just so you can kind of savor the words and the language and the imagery. So here we go, the Imagination Chamber. Just let me start out with the first couple passages here because it's really cool. Jordan College, like a great clockwork mechanism, with every part connected ultimately to every other, and all slowly and heavily ticking, despite the fur of dust on every cog, the curtains of cobweb draped in every corner, the mouse dirt, the insect husks, the leaf skeletons blown in every time the wind was in the east, rituals and habits whose origins no one could remember, but which no one wanted to disturb. The great wheels and the small, the pins and the levers all performing their functions, despite the wheezing and the creaking and the groaning of ancient timber. Sometimes the individual parts, a servant or a scholar, forgot precisely what their function was in relation to the whole, but never that the whole had a function, and it was enough to do again what you had done yesterday and every day before that, and trust to custom. And I mean, obviously I'm going to like anything related to Jordan College, but I really enjoyed that. He talked about custom, and we live in a world kind of devoid of ritual and custom, so it's nice that he brought that out for us. I like how he also talked about Jordan College as just kind of that, not necessarily mechanism, but a clockwork. And I don't know if any of you guys have read his work by the same name, Clockwork. I think it's also known as All Wound Up. But yeah, that's another great little novella story of his. And I think he cited that as actually the favorite thing that he's ever written of his own. When he was asked what his favorite work was, surprisingly, it wasn't his dark materials. It was Clockwork, so check that out. And the next one. Mr. Taphouse said one day as he ran his hand over a freshly planed length of oak, "Feel that, boy. Feel how old that is." Malcolm tried, but all he could actually feel was the glassy smoothness of the bare surface. So he imagined it. Acorn, sapling, mature tree, a mighty canopy in the summer, and a gaunt skeleton in the winter. From then on, whenever Malcolm had a piece of oak in his hands, or walnut, or even simple honest pine, he liked to think of the tree it had been. He liked to feel the immense age of it, visible in the growth rings, and the past of it, and the future too. As he thought of the acorns and walnuts and pine cones, he imagined it. He pretended he could see it. From somewhere he remembered the expression, the mind's eye. He imagined it, and thus he came to see it every time until it became second nature. "I'm your second nature," said Asta. "That's all right," he said. "It's probably you doing it too." "Bound to be," she said. And I like a couple things about that. Again, just the embodied quality of it, and just this notion of the imagination, and not as something that you're just making up. As the great alchemist Sebastian Makepeace said in The Secret Commonwealth, and again, Zafina said in The Amber Spyglass, again, imagination is not about just making stuff up. It is a bridge. It is a way to connect yourself to or with larger realities, just like Malcolm in the Tree. So I particularly like that passage. This is a good one, too. Serafina Pacala, on her cloud pine, would find a steel field of air at night and listen to the silence. Like the air itself, which was never quite still, the silence was full of little currents and turbulence, of patches of density and pockets of attenuation, all shot through with darts and drifts of whispering that were made of silence themselves. It was as different from the silence of a closed room as fresh spring water is from stale. Later, Serafina realized that she was listening to dust. And we all love the witches, and that is just such fantastic, evocative imagery. I mean, if it's ever possible to, hear silence, you get close to it. Actually, it kind of reminds me of Keats's line about heard melodies are sweet, those unheard are sweeter. Because maybe Keats was, well, I think Keats was definitely listening to some dust somewhere. Okay, and the last one, because we gotta end off with Lyra. Lyra at 18, sitting intent and absorbed in Duke Humphrey's library with the alethiometer and a pile of leather-bound books. Pushing the hair away from her eyes, pencil in mouth, finger moving down a list of symbols, pantomime and holding the stiff old pages open for her. Look, Pan, there's a pattern there. See? That's why they're in that sequence. And it felt as if the sun had come out. It was the second thing she said to Will next day in the Botanic Garden. So naturally any mention of Will at the Botanic Garden, that's great. But I mean, again, that's a great little snapshot, lantern slide, story particle, whatever, of Lyra at 18 in the library, poring over books with the alethiometer. And again, I particularly like his notion of when they're seeing that pattern, that association, which incidentally I talked a lot about with the alethiometer and poetry in my first class, aka video, it felt as if the sun had come out. And so that's just a great image. It's something that he alluded to a lot in Northern Lights when Lyra was learning to use the alethiometer. It would be like standing on top of a mountain and everything being obscured by clouds, and then the clouds suddenly breaking in sunlight, revealing what was underneath it. Again, it's such good stuff. I love the way he writes, obviously. And just to leave you guys with one more thing from the Imagination Chamber. And I know I've read this question somewhere, but I will pose this question to you guys, and if you get bored and want to have something to talk about in the comment section, you can discuss amongst yourselves. In Lyra's world, demons, and the world of the Mulefa, the oil-bearing wheels, both ways of making the working of dust apparent. In our world, what? So if Lyra's world, they have demons, well, and obviously have demons too, but in the world of the Mulefa, they have the oil-bearing seeds. In our world, in your world, how does dust work? What are the workings of dust? How does it make itself known and manifest? How does it inspire you? It's always a good question to ask. But yeah, in short, again, a little pricey, but it's available everywhere pretty much from online sellers. And I would definitely recommend picking it up because it's going to look very good on your shelf. And again, just kind of read it from that poetic frame of mind, and I don't think you will be disappointed. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Again, it was a little less scholarly and academic than our first class, but yeah, when stuff's going on in the Pullmanverse like that, I will try to make a video. Again, I might do a little unpacking or something when the Collectors comes out next month. But yeah, and that brings me to what I was basically thinking about doing with this channel. I mean, I have a lot of ideas. I would like to continue to do stuff like this, just have little readings, interviews every now and again. Again, and I have I'm going to be honest, a formidable His Dark Materials and Book of Dust collection. I'll see if I can find you guys a photogram to show here. But yeah, so I might be sharing that with you guys. And also, I've actually read a lot of Philip Pullman's other work. I kind of think of it as his other materials. But again, I mentioned stuff like Clockwork. He's done a lot of work with like fairy tales and the fireworker's daughter and all that sort of good stuff. So I may do a video on that. But yeah, among all the demons in the dust and talking about why ice bears are so cool, if you see what I did there, Anthora. Yeah, I mean, again, kind of my bread and butter, as you might get a taste of from my first video. I would also really like to delve into kind of the deeper themes that are buried in the Pullmanverse, just such as all the metaphors and symbolism and just all the allusions to literature and religion and philosophy, and hopefully come up with some new stuff or at least some new perspectives. And share them with you guys. Again, I was working on, and I still am working on a book that's kind of going in the same direction. But I also wanted to produce some content here on YouTube as well. So again, I hope you guys are enjoying. If you enjoyed today's class, feel free to hit that like button. If you want to enroll here at Jordan College full time, well, all you got to do is hit the subscribe button. But either way, and as always,